Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Work Well podcast. Today on the show, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Yvonne Barnes-Holmes. Yvonne has been a highly successful academic and clinician with a strong track record in teaching, training, publishing, and presenting for the last 20 years. She has published over 150 scientific articles and book chapters, and given over 500 presentations and workshops internationally. She was an associate professor in behaviour analysis and a senior research fellow at Ghent University before establishing Perspectives Ireland. She is a world leader in behavioural science and has co-developed a technique known as Process-based Behaviour Therapy, PBBT. So this is something I explore with Yvonne during our conversation. This episode is brought to you with thanks to the Fruit People. The Fruit People are leading the way in workplace nutrition, both in office and remotely. Check out thefruitpeople.ie for more. And it's thanks to the Fruit People we have a delicious fresh fruit and healthy snack pack to give away to one lucky listener to this episode. To find out how to enter, go to workwellpodcast.com, find the link to this episode with Yvonne, and you'll find the competition details at the bottom of the article. Now you can sit back and enjoy my chat with Yvonne Barnes-Holmes. Yvonne, hello and welcome to the Work Well podcast.
Thank you, lovely to be here.
So how are you?
Well, I think I'm as well as can be expected under the circumstances. So I think I'm no better, no worse than anybody else, really. And you?
Yeah, well, I'm really good. Yeah, really good. Nice spell of weather at the moment, so I'm certainly enjoying that. And how's everything? How's life and how's work? Maybe tell us a little bit about your background first to bring the listeners up to speed.
Yeah, so I've had a bit of a career change in a way. I graduated as a psychologist in 1991. I did a short spell as a management consultant and took some time off to have my kids, and then I really thought, no, psychology really is for me. I went back, trained as a behaviour therapist. I went back to do my PhD in behavioural psychology, realised that was the part of the field that was definitely for me, and went back in 1998 and around the same time started doing what we would call adult behaviour therapy. So I graduated my PhD from the National University of Ireland, Maynooth in 2001, did a postdoc as you do, and then I got my first academic post there as a behavioural and developmental psychologist in 2003. I stayed there till 2015 and did a stint as head of department in psychology there. And then our research team got a multi-million euro grant from what's like the Belgian Science Foundation to really develop our behavioural research and link it more tightly with the clinical work we were doing. So we lifted our team and off the 8 of us went to Ghent in Belgium and really, I think took advantage of that academic dream. And it was a 5-year grant. And when the grant ended, I thought it's time for a career change. I wanted to come back to Ireland and I really wanted to make the application of the clinical work and the scientific work we were doing my full-time job. So I left the academy, we started Perspectives Ireland, and then we just wrapped that around what we call PBBT, or Process-based Behaviour Therapy.
Excellent, yeah. And we'll get to PBBT in a moment. I imagine just it was a fantastic experience overall, just 5 years in a different country, in a lovely town, lovely city, I believe, in Ghent. Tell us a little bit about that experience, your first time working abroad and working with the team there and the research you were doing.
Yeah, we have had a very international life. Behavioral psychology is American. So as a behavioral psychologist, you're used to really, we've traveled probably everywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. South America, Japan, or whatever, and certainly a lot of European work as behavioral psychologists and as sort of basic researchers and clinicians. But it was really nice as an academic to be able to step out of administrative pressures, to step out of the pressures of student numbers and student satisfaction and things, which take up an awful lot of your time, and just to be paid to think, and just to be paid to think in a creative way. And then you think, oh, I wonder about that. And then off you go and do an experiment just about that. And then you can take the data from that experiment, and we could just basically run it straight into clinical practice or in an organization, or put it in a team in a hospital the following week. So you just have incredible, have a lot of money to be really creative with, without having to worry about all the forces that normally operate on you as an academic. All you have to do is publish, and you only have to publish your own research. You don't have to do a lot of other things that make the job less interesting. So, and like, we took our team from Ireland because they were trained at the level we needed. So off we all went to have a great expat life and stumble through Dutch together, Flemish together. So it was really, really great fun. It was interesting. My kids had left home, and I thought, you know what? What's there to lose? But I mean, scientifically and clinically, it was an absolute dream just to actually have time to think and develop things, and have a whole team of people to do that.
That does sound like the dream, to be honest. The freedom to think creatively, and to be paid for that as well. Tell us a little bit about the fruits of that creative thinking. Then you mentioned it. So PBBT, it's process-based behavior therapy.
Yeah, it is. So as I said, we were basically our behavioral psychologists, or basically behavior therapists. We were developing the bones of PBBT as the application of that science at NUI Maynooth for really 10 years. But as I said, we had the money and the time and the context in Belgium to really connect the basic research with the clinical work and with its application. So PBBT is essentially a way of understanding and influencing human behavior, not only its role in psychological suffering, but its role in understanding behavioral obstacles. And it's all based on a theory of complex human behavior that was really developed in the 80s. Now, it's fair to say that most of the research supporting the theory, the scientific theory, in the 35 years since been about, has actually been done by our research team. So there are literally hundreds and hundreds of what we call basic research, or proof of principle studies, that basically make a very compelling case that this scientific way of understanding behavior is really, really very solid. So what the grant allowed us to do was build on what we'd already done, tweak it in such a way that it would really stretch to very, very complex behavior, and to understand behavior in all sorts of contexts. So we could go into small organizations and large organizations, and we could work for very cheap or free, because the grant paid us to develop and disseminate the work. So because the work is so tightly tied to scientific theory, it then made sense for us to trademark PBBT to us, because it's a highly precise way of understanding behavior. And if you haven't really been trained to do that, then you won't be able to do it at the level that we think your precision is best at. So when we started, Ciara McAteague and I started Perspectives Ireland, we built that around the PBBT trademark, which is now in quite a lot of countries around the world. But for us, it essentially means that no one without our level of training and expertise and basically 20, 30 years of behavioral psychology is allowed to provide training in PBBT. So the work is really solid and crystal, and that's for us the way it should be.
Excellent. Yeah. So PBBT now is trademarked, it's patented.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the individual perspective then, for an individual who potentially would benefit from PBBT. What would that look like, that journey?
So if PBBT basically allows you to really understand what drives behavior, what drives my behavior, your behavior, the behavior of a group, the behavior in a workplace, it really helps you understand and identify, get eyes on the patterns of your own behavior, and what we would say, what the functions of those patterns are. Behavior doesn't happen randomly. It's never chaotic, it's never random, it's just complex and looks that way. So what we do, for example, in our training events and our weekend training events, etc., is we basically to teach you to understand the functions of your own behavior and the variables in your environment that drive those functions, that keep the behavior going the way it's going. And it's often a real eye-opener for people during these training events. We have a sense that we know what we're doing and we really owning our behavior, but in actual fact, much of the time our behavior owns us. We're sort of working on this automatic pilot. So what we really do is we teach you to really turn the headlights on and look very systematically at your own behavior. And then we teach you to regain control over your behavior, because without gaining control, your behavior is never going to line up with what it is you think it's going to lead to. So it's almost like if you want a certain outcome, we line the process up in a way that's actually going to give you that outcome. We always say, if you look after the pennies, the pounds look after themselves. But the thing about this, it's a skill. You have to learn the skill of, turning your eyes on, and you have to learn the skill of retraining your behavior so that it really works towards you and not against you. And that's essentially what it does at the individual level, and then it's scaled up, of course, for groups.
So you mentioned there the outcomes. Does the individual go into this, they have an idea of the outcome they're looking for? Is that an important step that they should?
It really helps. I mean, it helps if you have a working sense of what you value and where you want your behavior to go, but you would be surprised how gray those areas can be. I mean, people very often don't have the time. They have a sense that things aren't going the way they want, but it can sometimes take quite a bit of time at the beginning of a training event to say, no, what is it that you want? Not what do you think other people think you should want, but we want you to we want this life to be your life. And we want other people to be in your life. We don't really want this to be someone else's life. And of course, that's very often the place we end up. So if you haven't got any clarity or eyes on the life that you want, part of what we do at the beginning of training was we just say, who are you? And we try and dial you into, what does that person really want actually for themselves? And that's a challenging question, but it's the best place to start.
And who is the training for then? Is it potentially for everybody, or is it for someone or people that are facing a specific set of challenges?
It can be either, because behavior is behavior. So, I mean, of course, we modify it and adjust it. So it can be adjusted to, people looking to grow, and people looking to improve their sense of identity and wellness, and people looking to just gain more control over the behavior than they already have. But of course, given our history and our skills, we can orient it towards, we do an awful lot of work in addiction, for example, to people struggling with very specific issues and dealing with very specific obstacles, like traumatic obstacles or stress obstacles. So because it's a scientific theory of behavior, it understands behavior in all its context. So our job is to see the behavior that's the obstacle, see the behavior that's to be the solution, and switch one for the other.
Interesting. Yeah. And actually Brian Penny, who is a mutual friend of ours, he speaks about, I guess he introduces people to a subject, he motivates them, he provides some kind of upfront information. But when he speaks about yourself, Yvonne, he describes the fact that you kind of look under the hood.
I do.
So you get deep into the issues.
Yeah, I do. I mean, my job, I see 50% of my job to understand behavior, but behavioral psychologists always see the other 50% as changing it. We understand behavior to change it, and we want to change it in a way that's workable for the human being, and in a way, because you only live once, and in a way that allows you to find your place in the world, because we're all social beings. So we want to know who we are, but we also want to know where we fit. And it's one thing understanding behavior, it's another changing it. And there are many, many obstacles to getting control over your own behavior and changing it. And our job is to jump those obstacles.
And talk to me about the workplace then. How would PBBT work in the workplace, if you like? Again, is it abroad? Would you look at the whole organization, or is it preferable to look at specific groups within the organization, say managers or the HR team, or how would that work?
We tend to work in a bottom-up way. I mean, of course, we understand system level thinking, but because we're a process-based level of understanding, we work down at the level of processes, which is just working down at the level of individuals, and that bottom-up process-based way, as the name implies. So our job is to really fundamentally try to look at carefully, first of all, and then shift the relationship that individuals have with their own work-based behavior, for example, their behavior around their other colleagues, and their relationship between the human being and their work-based performances, because very often when organizations have sticky spots at any level, it very often comes down to the relationship between the individual and their performance. So for example, if you look at a lot of our training programs, we've certainly learned in the work that we've done with organizations over the years and in mental health, it is absolutely essential that people feel a sense of visibility from their work. At whatever level you are, you need to feel visible. And what we tend to do is we tend to alter the relationship between people and their performance at work to try to find a healthy, measured way of being visible. And a lot of the work we do with managers or senior managers or HR is not only helping those folks get visible because they're very important, have a very pivotal role in those companies, but it's also helping them to help the other employees to get visible. So we sort of think of it as the sort of interpersonal dynamics. And we want, if you work them at the individual level, they tend to be more supportive. They tend to be more visibility supportive. And that's if you've got a context where you can be visible, you've a context where you can grow, and where you've those contexts, you have a context where you can be productive and happy doing it. Mm-hmm. So it could be at any level really, but we have this bottom up capability that I think is PBBT's biggest asset.
And most organizations that I encounter, they might be going out and surveying the population. Maybe it's focus groups, maybe it's some one-to-ones, but they're gathering meaningful data of some sort. And let's say they identify a certain issue, maybe it's mental health related or kind of stress and resilience issues. So they might focus they might bring in a provider to deliver some services in the area of mental health awareness or resilience training. What kind of trends would an organization kind of be looking for or identify that would necessitate bringing in something like PBBT?
I think well, the classic example, of course, is work level stress and burnout, but there are also key issues like attrition. Like we spend a lot of time and money training people, and then we lose them because maybe they weren't the right people for the job in the first place, and maybe just the fit wasn't absolutely right. So recruiting the right people for the right job at the right level, and getting your money back for your investment, but allowing them to say, I'm here for the long haul, and so I'm worth investing for, and it's worth it for them investing in me. So it isn't just about things like burnout. You certainly learn when you've worked with the big healthcare providers like us. Like attrition is a big deal, and recruiting the right people. Healthcare, for example, has got these very high burnout and attrition rates. So, and it's costly to keep you in there. So for us, it's really about, making sure that a situation doesn't get to that level, because the truth is, if you look very carefully much earlier on, you can see the signs that people aren't happy in the job or there's something not right. We often think about this, it's like the organism doesn't fit the environment. And you can see that very early down the line, and companies are under all sorts of pressures to try to get the fit right, but of course it's expensive. So our job is to try to get in there as early as we can and see where the sort of two cogs are sort of rubbing against each other, rather than leave it to a situation that you've really, it's much bigger and much more expensive to come in and then solve it. And then you've got burnout, nutrition, and the wrong people in the wrong job and things like that.
Sure, yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
It saves you money. It saves you money. It saves you aggro. It's just a healthier, progressive, bottom-up way of living a life, running a company, and doing a job.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any kind of case studies, or I don't know, organizational journeys you could talk us through for an organization that has adopted PBBT?
Yeah, obviously we've worked with a lot of healthcare providers because they tend to bring in psychologists like us. And we've worked with big healthcare providers that run hospitals, for example. We did work with relatively recently with a large healthcare provider in Europe where we were putting in PBBT at an individual level, at all levels. So the organization allowed us to allocate 1 day per staff member at every single level to do the training program. And that basically allowed us either we did in-house training for certain groups and we did online training for individuals. And we provided the training. They did self-reflections, they did exercises. We basically taught them how to get a sense of ownership over their own behavior. So we often say it like this: it's about you owning your behavior rather than your behavior owning you. And it's about really learning to tell the difference. And this is what we focused on with that organization. This is classic PBBT. How do you tell the difference between who you are and what you do or what you achieve? It's really like you should own your performance, and that's the way to get the most out of it. And the sort of funny thing for this organization, it's the same for others, especially in healthcare. People think that if the job owns you, that's how you get the most out of it. And it's actually completely the other way around. So it was really at every level going in with that really core message. And of course, you have to adjust it for the different level. Remember, healthcare providers work in high octane environments every day of the week. So they're very sensitive to issues like attrition and burnout. But when we did follow up with this organization, this is something we find with PBBT that I think is quite unique to PBBT. And we find this a lot with our training with educational institutes. One thing it does is it allows you to reconnect with why you're doing the job in the first place, what you love about the job. And so not only does it lead to improvements in well-being, we always see it leads to a stronger desire to go to work. So not only are you creating decline in the burnout numbers and reducing the number of sick leave days, the most important factor we now look for is, has it increased your desire to go to work? Has it increased your desire for promotion? Has it increased the level that you would like to invest in the company? Not necessarily by doing more hours, but more in a healthy measure where here's me and here's the job that I love, or here's the bit about it that I don't love. And here's a conversation I could have with the HR manager about, could I go back to doing that bit of the job instead of doing this bit of the job? And so that I think is quite unique to PBBT. And we've seen that many times before. And we saw it on a very large scale with this organization, the desire to go to work and the desire to make sidewards or upwards moves inside that organization is now something we actually program for and look for in all of our feedback, because for us, then your relationship with your performance is working well.
I love that idea that you're empowering the individual to own their own behavior.
Yeah.
So with any kind of course or program that I've had or that I deliver, I always think it's so important to give that power back to the individual. So to empower the individual to make the change, to skill them up to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, a simple metaphor, we always use this metaphor. It's the metaphor of the house and the furniture. You're the house. Your behavioral output is the furniture. You are not the furniture. And again, I mean, you can have nice furniture, ugly furniture, big furniture, but you have to be the bricks and mortar, and you have to be very careful. If you allow yourself to get drawn down to the level of furniture, it's very, very hard to see the wood for the trees down there and to really know, is that the furniture that you want? So that little metaphor always helps us.
Yeah, I like it. And you touched on some of the outcomes like that the individual has a desire to go to work.
Yeah.
Where could the listeners go? Is there some kind of papers that you have on this, or is there the statistics somewhere so they could kind of review the outcomes?
You can look at some of the papers now. I mean, we're basic behavioral researchers, so it's pretty heavy going, but at least we know what we're talking about. I mean, I've published over 150 scientific articles and book chapters and books in my time. So if you want to dig in and you've got the time and you think you can hack it, there are samples up on our website. But if you remember that Perspectives Ireland, it is a new venture. So part of what we want to do is we want to be collecting performance-based data in Ireland. We want to move back to Ireland to reconnect to this world. So if you want to read the scientific bits underneath it, you can look at our website, perspectivesireland.ie, and there's some little samplers up there and a little summary of basically who we are. And if you want to dig in, you could actually Google me and you could find very easily some of the scientific articles that we've published. There are a great many, and feel free to do that too. But if you want to get to know us and you want to know who you are and you want to get a feel for what we do and what we've learned and what we can teach you, perspectivesireland.ie, just reach out to us. We're totally approachable. It's all human behavior. It's nothing we haven't seen before. So just get on to us, have a look at who we are. We can put you in touch with what we've written and published, and look, we can take it from there.
Fantastic. And I'll definitely reference all of those links, any links where we can in the show notes. But yeah, you mentioned over 150 papers. Yeah. I think you have a bit of a record or something, do you? Are you the most published Irish academic or something like that?
Yes, I have been the most highly cited female psychologist in Irish history in terms of citations, which is the number of people that actually read your work. So yeah, I mean, look that matters to people, and you know, we work very hard on taxpayers' money. So I mean, it was money well spent, but we've got good lineage and have worked very hard. So if people really want to dig into the nuts and bolts and actually read the scientific stuff, be my guest. We've written plenty of it.
Fantastic. Yeah. And then what about on the personal side of things? So you moved back from Belgium quite recently. Yeah. I believe you've settled up you're in Donegal at the moment.
Yeah, I live in Muff, just outside Derry. It's an Irish company. I lived in Kildare for a long time. I lived in Cork, so I feel very connected, really, to the Republic, as you want to say. But at the same time, you know, I've got a very large family, so just living on the border in the Donegal landscape, you know, quite an outdoors character. So I really feel like I've got the best of both worlds. I've got all the advantages of the north and family, and I've got all the advantages of Donegal. So I think I've really found my little spot.
Fantastic. And I was going to ask then, because you're clearly busy now with setting up the new company, how or are you managing to dedicate time to your own well-being at present?
I have to be honest, I make my well-being and personal growth my responsibility every single day. I think it's a gift I give myself every day. That gift could be time, that gift could be pride, that gift could be gratitude. But I make sure I give it to myself every day with things like morning routines, etc. I also am true to my word. I watch my own behavior very, very carefully. I do not pull any punches or bluff myself. You know, I try to really take time and be honest and say, look, what was that behavior about, Yvonne? And is that behavior really going to get you where you want it to go, not where it pretends it's going? So I really do practice what I preach. I work every day with curiosity and not with judgment on myself, to say, okay, you know, if this stays as it is, are you happy where you are now? And will you be happy with where this goes? So I try to stay connected to myself in a sense of growth, if that's possible, every single day, because I do not think this is a dress rehearsal.
Excellent. Yeah, I think it's so important to practice what you preach, isn't it? So great to hear you doing that from a behavior perspective as well.
You know, if I don't do it for myself, I'm not sure anybody's going to come and do it for me. So I take that full responsibility on my own shoulders.
Fantastic. Well, Yvonne, thanks so much for your time. I think, is it perspectivesireland.ie?
It is, yeah.
That's the site. Listen, thanks so much for your time, Yvonne. It's beautiful weather out there. Enjoy the Donegal countryside.
I certainly will be, and you too.
Take care. We'll talk to you again soon.
Take care, Ben. Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone. Brian here again. A big thank you for listening right to the end of this episode of the Work Well podcast. I want to give a big shout out to our partners, the Fruit People, who are leading the way in workplace nutrition, both in office and remotely. You can check them out at thefruitpeople.ie. And it's with thanks to the Fruit People that we have a delicious fresh fruit and healthy snack pack to give away to one lucky listener for each episode of season 3. To find out how to enter, go to workwellpodcast.com and find the link to the latest podcast episode. Finally, are you interested in diving deeper in the area of workplace well-being? Why wouldn't you? You need to check out the WorkWell Institute. The WorkWell Institute is an online hub for all your workplace well-being, education, and training needs, whether you're an individual or an organization. Head on over to workwellinstitute.org, where you'll find out the details on all the courses available, including my flagship program, Developing a Workplace Wellness Program That Lasts. Check it out at workwellinstitute.org. Thanks again for listening. The original music for this podcast was composed by my friend Greg Clifford. Thank you, Greg. Remember to work well, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Work Well podcast.